Shalom, shalom. Welcome, Mishpacha and Chavarim, for joining us once again for our midweek MIDrash. And welcome. We are in the midst of an excellent study on some of the most profound portions of Scripture. We are going deep into the prophet Navi HaGadol, the great prophet Isaiah, Yeshayahu, and we are right in the thick of it. And we welcome you. We have our regular folk on the line with us, and we have Herman on the line also. And we're going to go into some deep teachings. We have a few teachings from last week. We read chapter 8 and verse 8 rather in the Hebrew. We're going to do a little recap on some of the notes that I have, commentary, and then we're going to read the Hebrew of verse 9. And verse 9 concludes the fourth of five stanzas in this portion of Scripture. A lot of people are not aware that between Isaiah 52:13 and 53:12, there are five separate stanzas to the fourth and longest of the servant songs which are in Isaiah. And as we pointed out, as Herman pointed out, verse 7, 8, and 9, we just read verse 7 was kind of a change of pace. So we're going to go and conclude the fourth stanza before we end with the concluding stanza of 3 verses. So we're going to do a review of that and see how far we get. We're taking our time. We're taking the scenic route. We want to see everything there is to see. I see beside the sea. So we will do that this evening. And again, we thank you for visiting us, and I pray that you're telling other folk about this broadcast, this program. If you're finding it useful, if you're finding it as being beneficial to you, we'll put a lot of work, a lot of hours into this study. We're taking this seriously, but we're coming together, and we're making this presentation and being led by the Ruach, by the Spirit of the Most High. And we're grateful once again that you're with us tonight. And again, verses 8 and 9 of 53 is our goal for the day, and it's number 32 of our broadcasts on the midweek MIDrash. We are meeting every Wednesday evening, YAHUAH willing, the Lord willing, 7:30 p.m., roughly an hour, maybe an hour and 10, a little change to finish things up. And then we're also having our study and our teachings on Sabbath morning, Saturday at 11 a.m. every Sabbath day. So be there or be square. And we want you to be there rather than be square. It's no fun to be a cube. And anyway, so we're getting started, and we've got a lot of ground to carry and cover. So shalom, shalom. I welcome everyone. Any initial statements before we plunge forward? Well, Gilbert, how about you open up in prayer for us as we get started?
Let us pray. O Elohim, you have made us of one blood, all the people of the earth. Send us your blessed Son to preach peace to those who are far off, to those who are near. Grant that people everywhere may seek after you and find you. Bring the nation unto your fold. Pour out your Spirit on all flesh, and listen and hasten the coming of your kingdom. Through Yeshua the Mashiach, our YAHUAH. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen. Toda Rabbah. We give thanks to the Most High, and you'll notice we use certain terminologies, which we will get into as we proceed. So again, we're grateful for your joining us this evening, and Amen. So once again, I was going to ask Herman if you would do us the honors of reading verses 7 through 9 again as we conclude this fourth stanza in the great servant song.
Okay, here we go. Verses 7 through 9. He, referring to the servant, was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. He was led as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth. He was taken from prison and from judgment. And who will declare his generation? For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgression of my people he was stricken. And they made his grave with the wicked, but with the rich at his death, because he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. And I'm going to go right into some of the points I want to make on verse 8, taken from prison and judgment. Okay, prison and judgment. He was arrested. It was an unfair trial. He was railroaded essentially. We see these things popping up in history from time to time where somebody is tried unjustly. You know, in the past years, we had to deal with lynchings. We had to deal with all kinds of horrendous things, going back to the Salem witch trials, where if somebody happened to own a cat, and if they didn't like that woman, they can easily destroy that person. Shalom, William. Shalom, William. So, a prison. He was taken from prison and from judgment, and the Septuagint says, "In humiliation, his judgment was taken away, and who will declare his generation?" Okay, who will declare his generation? Because he was taken away from prison and from judgment. Who will declare? So, who will live to survive to give an account of this person who was, whisked away, spirited away in the middle of the night? Okay, if you can mute your phones, that would be good, because otherwise we hear everybody's street traffic. Okay. His generation and descendants. Okay, it speaks of his generation and his descendants. And there's a couple of things with regard to the mindset of the people being addressed. To die childless was tragic. You know, the form in the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, where people are shown prosperity and they have a sense of of immortality by passing on healthy genes to the next generation after that, and so on. So that's why it's tragic when it comes to the Melachim, the kings of that are appointed, and you see that you might have a good king and his son will turn bad, or he'll have some bad, and then all of a sudden someone good will come up. Very rarely, right? It was the majority were bad, because Yahuwah was to be their king. You know, the people rejected him. They didn't reject Samuel. They didn't reject Saul or David. They rejected him. Okay, and let me see. It was considered a tragedy or even a curse. 2 Samuel 18:18, one of the bad sons. 2 Samuel 18:18. Now Absalom in his lifetime has taken and set up an altar for himself, which is in the king's valley. For he said, I have no son to keep my name in remembrance. He called the pillar after his own name, and to this day it is called Absalom's monument. And of course we know Absalom was not a good kid. He was not a good kid. He was David's son who tried to take his throne away from him, and was not too cool. And again, when reading Isaiah, we turn to Isaiah, Yeshayahu, to explain some of these things. So Isaiah chapter 56, verses 3-5. And this again has that same idea of passing on our genes as being essentially a symbol of our perceived immortality without fully recognizing the resurrection of the dead and all these other things. We would have children and they would have children, so on and so forth. But this presents a quandary. Okay, verse 3-5, it says, let not the eunuch, let not the eunuch say, here I am, hineni, behold, here am I. I'm a dry tree, for thus says Yahuwah. So let not the eunuch say, I am a dry tree, for thus says Yahuwah. So whatever the eunuch might say or think of in his mind, it's overridden by what Yahuwah has to say. Always. We think we got to figure it out. We feel sorry for ourselves. I'm a victim. I'm a fool. I'm whatever. Okay, but what does Yahuwah have planned for you? What does he see you as? He's investing his time and his word in you. Does he consider you a loser? Or does he consider you a task, a diamond in the rough perhaps, but certainly worth his efforts? So let not the eunuch say, I am a dry tree, for thus says Yahuwah, to the eunuchs who keep my Sabbaths and choose what pleases me, and hold fast to my brit, my covenant, even to them I will give in my house and within my walls a place, and a name better than that of sons and daughters. Okay, so I'm cut off because I cannot have children, but better than sons and daughters is the fact that our name will live on. Our name, it lives on through our children, right? But we don't need to necessarily make that connection. So those people who are childless, they're living a full life with no regrets, because that's not how the game is played. That's not how immortality is reached anymore. We seek the giver of life, Messiah. He is the way, the truth, and the life. He's the one that bestows life on those who are his. Okay? So, with that in mind, I will give them in my house my bait, because you are living stones of that bait, and within my walls a place and a name better than sons and daughters. I will give them an everlasting name that shall never be cut off. And the terminology is intentional. He's a eunuch. Certain things have been cut off. But in him, his line will not be cut off because of his faithfulness in what? Keeping the Sabbaths, plural. Keeping the weekly Sabbaths, keeping the annual Shabbatot, the Passover, unleavened breads, and so on and so forth. The 7 appointed Moedim, appointed times, in which we are to observe. We are to keep these things. He makes them holy. We are to keep them holy. Okay? And that is my commentary from verse 8. He was cut off from the land of the living, and for the transgressions of my people was he stricken. And we talked about this a lot, other verses and things during the course of our teaching last week. I just wanted to throw that in there before we're ready to go into verse 9. And we're going to go right into the Hebrew of that. And any comments on verse 8 yourself, Herman?
Well, one of the things that I attempted to do was to try to get to the bottom as to why such a difference in phrasing. And as you read, he was taken from prison and from judgment, whereas the Greek version, the Brenton Greek version of Isaiah 53 says, in his humility, his judgment was taken away, and also in Acts, his humility is taken away. So it's obvious that Luke is quoting from the Greek version. So I tried throughout the week, throughout these last 2 weeks, I tried to get to the bottom as to why the difference. And I did not come up with a solid conclusion. But I studied and studied, but I could not come up with a solid conclusion. I only have theories, and I don't know if it's worth using up a lot of time bringing forth theories that are inconclusive.
Well, I mean, it's an important subject because the Septuagint isn't just a Greek translation. It is the oldest translation from the Hebrew into Greek. So it's not Greek in its origin. Hebrew translates wonderfully into Greek, and back and forth. So the original version of the Septuagint, let me see if I can rephrase that. The source material of the Septuagint was Hebrew. So the Masoretic text, which comes later with little modifications, little changes, little twists, nooks, and crannies, they're going to have some differences. But I would rely more on the Septuagint version and the Aramaic versions of the Brit Hadashah writings, which are available through a lot of research and so on. So again, it's not just, and some of the rabbis, that's why they dismiss the New Covenant writing, because, he's quoting the Greek, he's quoting the New Testament, he's not quoting the Masoretic. Well, no kidding, Sherlock, because the older manuscript was not the Masoretic. Masoretic comes much later. So they had the earlier Hebrew, which is what was translated into the Septuagint, plain and simple. So I would tend to think that in humiliation, his judgment was taken away. He was taken away. Humiliation. Here he's the king. Here he's been reduced to reduced to a criminal's death. That's what Shaul says. The Greeks require a sign, or they require wisdom, and the Jews require a sign. They want to see something wonderful, boom, happening. And the Greeks require intelligence. As far as the Greeks are concerned, a holy man dying a criminal's death does not make sense. humiliation. We don't like to use that term with regards to our anointed one, the anointed perfect one. But how else would you phrase that when the creator of the universe is encased in flesh, a body prepared for him, and he allows himself, because don't forget, he could have changed it at any time. He said, I could have called down legions of malakim, of angels, and they would have completely wiped out not only the Sanhedrin's goons, but all of Rome, not just the Roman soldiers in Judea, but all of them, wiped them off the face of the earth, right? So he allowed this to happen. Remember, it was the cup that his father gave him to drink. It was not his will, it was the Father's plan that it be done this way. It wasn't his wish that he have to endure this thing, but that was part of the plan. Humiliation. Just like he humbled himself, which we hear the word condescension, when somebody talks down to us, like, yeah, I understand what you're saying. You're very bright, whatever. It's condescending attitude, but true condescension is going from a high place to a lower place in reality, not just in imagined statuses in the world, where people think that they're smarter than anyone simply because they come from a better or perceived better location on this blue marble, right? So, in humiliation and judgment, he was taken away. His judgment was taken away. Who shall declare of his generation? For his life was taken away from the earth. Because of the iniquities of my people, he was led to death. So again, that whole scenario, we can visualize that whole verse. It's very visual. And any other? Did you want to comment on that, Herman? As far as your speculation on that?
I'll share a little bit regarding. I'll try to share what I dug up regarding the differences. When we compare the three passages, the Hebrew text, the Greek text, and the New Testament, we'll see that there are some slight differences in tense. Like, for instance, one would say was and the other is. And there are slight differences in vocabulary, like, for instance, being silent or being dumb, silent. So there's a slight differences in vocabulary and in tense. However, what bugged me, well, not really bugged me, but what intrigued me was why such a big difference? We have to keep in mind that when the Greek translators are translating from the Hebrew, they're working with a consonantal text. Okay, so that's one thing that we have to keep in mind. But before I continue with that, I want to read the English translation of the Hebrew, and I want to point out a grammatical point, because there is a difference in the idea, and you'll see what I mean. In the Hebrew, it says he was taken from prison and from judgment. And what that communicated to me is that the servant is passively receiving the action. There is somebody or someone or an institution that is leading him along from these two places, from prison and from judgment, or the judgment hall. So the servant is passively receiving the action. He is being taken along. However, when we see the Greek and the New Testament, it says in his humiliation, his judgment was taken away. It's totally different, because here the servant is not passively receiving the action. The servant is in a state of being. And that's one of the things that caught my attention and intrigued me. How could it be possible that in one case the Hebrew says the servant is passively receiving the action, he's taken from this, he's taken from there, but here it says in his humiliation. So there is a big difference there. The servant is in a state of being, and he is not granted a just trial. And of course, the New Testament, quoting from the Greek, communicates the same thing. The servant is in a state of being, and he is not granted a just trial. So I was saying, why the difference? Now, the only thing that I can come up with is, as I said, since the translators are working with a Hebrew consonantal text, it does not have vowels, they may have understood the word otzer, okay, because remember that the Hebrew line begins Me
Otzer.
Otzer U Mimishpat Lukach. So the first word there, Me Otzer, it's possible that the Greek translators understood that word without vowel pointing, that they understood that word as a noun. And this is why it's possibly they rendered humiliation. Because again, the consonantal text doesn't have the vowel pointing to indicate whether it's a noun or a verb. So it's possible that the Greek translators understood Otzer as a noun, and hence they rendered it humiliation. Because Otzer can have various meanings. It can mean weakness, poverty, it could mean coercion, or to be pressed down. So it's possible that in seeing it as humiliation, they thought that the servant was in a humiliated state due to his physical and political weakness. That's the only thing that I can come up with regarding the difference, because there is a big difference.
Yeah.
Now, another possibility is that the Greek translators are simply having at their disposal a different Hebrew manuscript, because there were different manuscripts, Hebrew manuscripts. And I want to read here, I want to read a quick paragraph from a website called the Great Isaiah Scroll. Okay, and you can all go online and check out this website. And I'm just going to take an excerpt from this long article. It's called the Great Isaiah Scroll. You can go online. And this is the excerpt. It says, "We would like to call your attention to the complexities of translating the words of the prophet Isaiah around 2,800 years ago, as reflected in the different Hebrew variants and subsequent English translations. ... ellipsis, right? I'm going to continue. The evidence emerging from the Qumran scrolls is that there were several concurrent versions of the biblical text, and that's important. There were several concurrent versions of the biblical text, of the Hebrew consonantal text. The one now referred to as the Proto-Rabbinic or the Proto-Masoretic text enjoyed a special status by the Greco-Roman period that apparently became the authoritative text for mainstream Judaism towards the end of the Second Temple." So the point that I want to focus on here from this long article, which I quoted an excerpt, is that this article is saying that there were different Hebrew consonantal texts. And this is not the first time that I've come across this concept. Because I do like textual criticism, and I get into that a little bit. And it's not the first time where scholars have said, look, there were just like there are families of New Testament manuscripts, right? You have the Alexandrian text type, you have the Byzantine text type, and so on, the Western text type. So too, there were different text types. These scholars say there were different families, Hebrew text types. So this could be another possibility why there is such a difference when we compare Isaiah 53:8 with that in Acts. And again, remember that I started out saying that these are speculations because I could not get to the bottom as to why the difference. But it would seem to me that it's possible the Greek translators either understood that word as a noun and were paraphrasing, like we do in English today, because there are a lot of translators that paraphrase a verse that could be ambiguous, and or the Greek translators had a slightly different manuscript from the manuscript that eventually became the Masoretic text.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly possible. A lot of possibilities there, but I wouldn't have too many worries about the inerrancy of the word being preserved for us.
No, it doesn't worry me at all, Bob.
No.
That is one thing for sure. I am not worried. I'm not concerned. It's just something that intrigued me as I studied the Hebrew text, and of course, as I went to the New Testament, because as a Bible student, that's what I like to do.
Exactly. And how readily available were the Aramaic translations, which were a lot more elusive in availability? they can be scrutinized as well as like the Masoretic and the Septuagint, because both of those are readily available and accessible.
Yes, well, I cannot say which particular Targum was available in the first century during the apostolic times for Isaiah. I cannot say. I have never looked into that, so I don't know. I don't know. I simply don't know. And whether or not how if there was one available during that time for the book of Isaiah, how was it translated from the Hebrew? That's a very good question, which I don't know the answer to because I have not done my homework in that area.
Because I do know in Zechariah, there are some portions that the Targumim, especially I believe it's Jonathan, I have researched that he specifically does refer to Messiah as the Tzemach, and he translates Tzemach, the branch, into Mashiach, the Messiah, and also the name of the high priest. He identifies as not only Yahushua but also Yeshua, and he refers to Yeshua as being a type of something in the future, a mofet, a future event that the priest and his people are a sign of something greater, something better. And again, we have this high priest envisioned with a crown, like a ruling crown, like a king, like a melech. And
yes, I'm aware of that, but the question that we should ask ourselves is, when did Targum Jonathan come on the scene? And that I don't know. Was it before the first century or after the first century? So that would be something to look into.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that. Keep in mind that these Targumim, you have different books, and I would imagine that these books are translated at different times. This is not something that could be done, in a week or so.
Yes. Yes.
Well, that was my intrigue. That's what I tried to get to the bottom of, but unfortunately could not come to a conclusion. But again, I'm not concerned with the inerrancy of the text or the authority of the New Testament. I'm not concerned about that anymore. Right. I understand that there are variances in manuscripts, and I also understand that there are families of manuscripts.
Indeed. Okay, well, let's get into the text. And we're looking at verse 9 here. Table. Okay. This is verse 9, the 4 lines of them, and we see the marks of, that separate, give commas and so on. Move it for 1 second. 1 second. Just move it a second. Just please. Okay. Because the lamp is in the way. Okay. Still a little bit in the way. Okay. Okay, so here we go. Verse 9. Vayitain, and he assigned. Natan is the root of that is to give. He made. He gave or he made. He assigned. Okay. Vayitain, et, the sign of the direct object, which is the next word, which is re, sha, rim, right? Yesha, Yesha, Yeshaim, Rishaim, Rishaim, right? Risha, the first 3 letters, Rasha, Resh, Shane, and Ayin is evil. The root to be morally wrong. It's a word that's translated iniquity. Rasha, it's Tov and Ra, the 2 extremes of knowledge, that which is good, that which is evil. So, and he was assigned with the wicked ones. Okay. Kivro, and there's the little mark, the double dot above the resh, to indicate the end of that line. Okay, he was assigned. He was assigned with the wicked ones in their graves. Okay, and kevar is the word that's translated into sepulcher or grave, tomb. Okay, he was assigned with the wicked ones or the corrupt ones.
Bob, let me just say something quickly.
Yeah.
Rashaim is a plural term.
Right.
So it would be wicked ones.
Right, plural, right. Rasha and the Rashaim are the plural, the im, the yod and the mem, final mem. That's always the a plural ending. He was assigned with the wicked ones, and he was assigned with the wicked ones in their graves. Okay. They made his grave with the wicked. Okay. The next line is Ve'et and Ashir with the rich. Ve'et Ashir and with the rich. Bemotav. Okay. And Movet is to die or to kill. Okay. And with the rich in his death, in the death of him. Okay. And with the rich. Yeah.
Just another point being Bemotav is also plural, believe it or not. So it's also the language here. Remember that I said that these last two stanzas are quite different from the other ones? The language here is quite peculiar. The vocabulary is peculiar. It's using these plurals, and I think that there is significance to that. And if we have time, I hope to bring out why it says in his deaths, along with the wicked ones in his deaths, because it's really plural. It's a plural.
Okay, and they made his grave with the wicked and with the rich at his death, with the rich, with his deaths, with the deaths. Because the wicked ones are in graves, the rich one in graves, the plural. Okay. And then al lo Hamas, though no violence. And it's ironic that we are in our current day, we know what Hamas is, right? It's the name of a group supported by the PLO, right? Hamas. Their name means violent ones, violent ones, the ones who will maltreat or do wrong. It's not a good name to call yourself, okay? Al lo Hamas, though no violence. Okay. Asa, he did. Though he did no violence. So again, the irony of this verse, which concludes this small portion, is making some strange accusations, some strange points. He was assigned with the rich ones in the grave, and with the evil ones, plural, in the grave, and with the rich in the deaths of him. Okay, and though he had done no violence, so he should not have had an early death. A tzaddik is somebody who can expect to live a long life. You can move that, please. Okay, you can expect to live a long life as a reward for being a holy one, a tzaddik, a kadoshim, one of those who are faithful to the eternal Yah, who are not going to betray his trust or mess around, but to be faithful, to be strong in him. Okay, and please don't hesitate to chime in, anyone. No violence, though he did no violence. And this isn't, and then he talks about the deceit in his mouth, but this is physical violence. He did no violence. You know, it's interesting that all of Messiah's time, he when he cleanses the temple, you know, he does that by uprooting the tables and tossing the tables. But we don't see really any, he doesn't take exception physically, respond physically to anyone. He does not, that's not how he rolls, you know? He does not respond violence for violence. Otherwise, like I said, he could have called down Malachim, who would have responded and would have rescued him in the midst of his arrest. It's got to come up just a little bit. Just rest that on your hand, okay? And the last section, the lo and no, okay, and no or no, mirma, that's this next word here. Bear with me. Mirma, I can't quite get my hand around there. Mirma, okay, the lo, mirma, no, is they just deceit. The word mirma is fraud, guile, treachery, falsehood. There's no falsehood. There's no deceit. There's no fraud, no guile in him. Even as Messiah recognized that in one of his Talmudim, he says, there's no guile. You're a true Israelite. There's no guile. There's no guile in you. Your honesty shines through. You are a true Israelite. So it is a compliment. And there was no guile. Okay, and the final word there, befiv, in the mouth of him. Okay, there was no violence did he do, and there was no deceit in his mouth. Again, the fact that he's having an early departure in his life and the strange circumstances thereof, assigned with the wicked in the grave and with the rich in his death. Then it says, though he did nothing wrong, nor did he say anything wrong. He neither said nor did anything that would have caused this type of repercussion in his life in the natural. But of course, we know through jealousy and evil envy, they, the Father allowed these things to happen in such a manner. Any comments on this last portion of the verse, Herman?
No, not on the last portion, but I do have some comments on the first line and the second line.
Okay. All right. Okay, go flat.
Okay, so
move it for a second.
Interesting language here. As I said, the Hebrew literally says, and he or it, also be understood as it, and he or it gave the wicked ones his grave. So there's very interesting language here, and my understanding of that is that there is someone or some institution, and I'll get to that in a little while, that assigned the servant his graves, but not just his grave, the grave of sinners, because it's it is written as wicked ones. So that's what I think the verse is communicating, that there is someone or something that assigned the servant his grave, and not just his grave, but assigned the graves of the sinners. Okay? Because it is the servant that once again is receiving the action. Okay? The servant is not the doer of the action. There is someone or something that is doing the action unto him. Mm-hmm. So designating or assigning his grave, the servant's grave. So the question then, of course, is who is the one? Who is the subject of the verb? Who is the one that is doing the action? The grammatical subject, I mean, okay? Remember that, just quickly, you have the subject, you have the verb, and you have the object. The subject, the grammatical subject, is the person that does the action, whereas the object is the person that receives the action. So the question is, who is the grammatical subject? Who's the one that's assigning the grave? And the only thing that I can come to is it was either the high priest or it was the council that assigned the servant as well with the wicked ones assigned his grave. That's my understanding. That's the only thing that I can come up with that would make sense. Keep in mind that it says Vayitain. It's really of a third person masculine, but it can also be understood as it. Okay, as I said, and I'm not going to go too much into the grammar, so it could be as, and he gave the wicked, or he assigned, or it assigned the wicked ones his grave. Well, it's either the high priest or the council that has done the planning or the assigning. Ready? Now, in Luke chapter 22, verse 37, Luke chapter 22, verse 37, Yeshua is speaking to his students, and he says to them, "For I say to you that this which is written must still be accomplished in me." Quote, "And he was numbered with the transgressors." So notice what Yeshua is saying to to his Talmudim, to his disciples, that this has to be accomplished, guys. He says, guys, this has to be accomplished. He is going to be numbered with the transgressors. So the question again is, who's the one that's doing the numbering? Who is the one that's doing the considering that this person, that this Yeshua of Nazareth is a transgressor? And the answer again, it has to be the Jewish leadership. They're the ones that are numbering him with the transgressors. They're the ones that assign to him a dishonorable death as well as a dishonorable grave, burial. So that's my conclusion, that it had to be the Jewish leadership that numbered him, that considered him a transgressor, and that assigned his grave.
Right.
Let me see. He's condemned, right? He's condemned as a transgressor, and it is proposed to him to be buried in a place that's designated for dishonorable people, just as he has a dishonorable death. He's hung on the tree, something that is associated with a curse, to be hung on a tree, right? But their plans were frustrated. Their plans were frustrated because, of course, Joseph and Nicodemus come on the scene, and they bury him. They bury him with dignity. So although they planned a disgraceful death and a disgraceful burial, those plans were frustrated with the burial, as far as the burial is concerned.
Right. And a lot of criminals were just dumped in Gehenna, in the valley of the judgments, of the evil burnings. So a lot of criminals were just dumped there. So the fact that the rich intercede with the body's needs after death, that he was put in a sepulcher that had never been used. It was clean as far as that goes, right? And that his body was taken care of. It was,
and he was
off.
Buried with dignity. And remember that I said in the past that when you study this prophecy and you look at all of these little details, a person cannot orchestrate this thing, man.
Exactly.
Could it be that Yeshua could orchestrate this? So what is he going to do? He's going to go to the council, to Joseph and Nicodemus, and say, guys, when I die, I want you to do this for me. I mean, you just can't orchestrate this stuff. In the natural, it is not possible for a person to orchestrate all these details.
Right. And Pilate could just as easily said no. Let's just get out of my sight. I want to get rid of this body, and it's giving me nothing but trouble, sleepless nights. My wife can't sleep anymore. She's not talking to me anymore because I've let go this guy and released a murderer in his place. Why would he do a favor to? Why would he do a favor? Because it says he becomes pals with Herod, and Herod was also not impressed with Messiah or his claims. So that's why I think that is an amazing verse. His grave with the wicked, but with the rich at his death, and they get that sepulcher that had not been used. It would have been different if Uncle Harry and Aunt Maud were already in there, but it was clean. It was ritually clean. It was.
Well, Bob, you're making a good point there, because, and I'm going to jump the gun a little bit, because in that culture, usually the sepulchers were for family members.
Mm-hmm.
And it's significant that it was a new tomb that had been hewed out and not used. So I'll get into that in a moment. But getting back, I want to get back to this concept that and they assigned him, or let me see how the verse says, in verse 9, and they made his grave with the wicked, right? And again, my understanding is that either the priest, the high priest, or the council assigned the grave. Along those lines, I want to read a passage from the Mishnah, which connects with this, man. It's amazing how the Mishnah records this custom. This is from the Mishnah, Sanhedrin, chapter 6, from the Mishnah. Sanhedrin 6, and it says this, the following, and it's an excerpt. I'm not quoting the whole thing because it's very, very long. So I'm just going to quote a paragraph, but notice the parallelism here with what we just read. Notice this. In Sanhedrin 6 in the Mishnah, it says, how was he hanged? Oh, and by the way, this is not referring, this passage in the Mishnah is not referring to Yeshua. It's talking about the criminals in general. It's talking about a general concept. It's not referring to Yeshua. I want to make that clear. The passage is not referring to Yeshua, but the parallels are pretty amazing. Okay, so it says, how was one hanged? That's the question. And then it says, the beam was put in the earth, ... And should he leave him overnight? And should he leave him overnight, he transgresses a negative commandment, as it reads in Deuteronomy, quote, thou shalt not leave his corpse on the tree overnight, but thou shalt surely bury him on that day. For he, and in parentheses, for he that is hanged is a dishonor of God. So notice that. And then it says, how so? Question. Then it says, how is a man hanged? He is a blasphemer. Or why is a man hanged? Why is a man hanged? And then it says, it gives one reason why. He is a blasphemer. Hence, the name of heaven is violated. ... Because I want to get to the point. The one executed was not buried in the cemetery of his parents, but 2 cemeteries were prepared by the court. Now notice, this is why I want to get into the point here, because apparently the Mishnah records that it was the court that prepared cemeteries for these people that were considered criminals, blasphemers, and that were hung, considered a curse. So I think the parallelism here is quite interesting. So once again, it says, the one executed was not buried in the cemetery of his parents, because again, as I said before, usually the tombs were for family members. And then it says, but 2 cemeteries were prepared by the court, one for those who were slain with the sword and choked, and another cemetery for those who were stoned and burned. After the flesh of the corpse was consumed, about a year or so, right? The relatives gathered the bones and buried them in their right place. So what I want to focus on here in this passage is that notice that it says he, and should he leave him overnight, he transgresses. Who's the he? Who's the one? And it has to be the court. The court has to order that this person cannot stay overnight, according to the Torah. So there are some parallelism here. There is a dishonored death, especially for those who were blasphemers. And when we read the New Testament text, one of the charges in the Sanhedrin that was brought up against Yeshua was that he was a blasphemer because he called himself the Son of God. And the other parallel is that it was usually the court that prepared cemeteries. They assigned the cemeteries, the cemeteries for the burial. So I think that this is very interesting.
Oh, no doubt.
Burial place for those that were deemed wicked and condemned. Yes, Bob.
Yeah, another interesting thing is the spelling. The rich is spelled ayin, shin, yod, resh. The wicked ones are resh, shin, ayin, yod, and the final mem, the plural. So the rich and the wicked are opposites. There's a parallelism. We know that there's a lot of overlapping of the rich being corrupt, of the rich being evil, their riches coming from ill-gotten gains, and there's a lot of scriptures. It's the love of money is the root of all evil, not money in itself. Money is remuneration for services rendered, right? So the money in itself is not evil. It's the love of it. It's the obsession over it.
Right.
Psalm 37 says, a little that a righteous man has is better than the riches of many wicked. Proverbs 18:23. Yeah.
That's a good observation. I didn't notice that if you invert the letters, you get an opposite. You get a different word, and they correspond, which is the opposite. That's very interesting. The wicked and the rich, very interesting. That's good. I'm going to chew on that one a little bit. Yeah. So, Bob, if you don't mind, I'd like to get back and just talk a little bit about the second. Let me see. The grave. Yeah. So that's the deal with that, and that passage in the Mishnah. So with the rich, buried with the rich, of course, my understanding of that is that there were two people that came forth from the leadership, which were Joseph and Nicodemus. Okay, Joseph was described as a rich person, a disciple. He had access to Pilate, which means that he was not just a regular Joe Schmo, even though he was Joseph. He had access to Pilate and requested the body. Matthew says that it was wrapped in a clean linen cloth. Mark says that it was fine linen. So that's pretty impressive. It's a fine linen, because remember, he's buried with the rich. So there's a heavy cost, right? This is good stuff. So Joseph requests the body from Pilate, and it's buried in a new tomb. And I'll talk about that in a moment, in clean linen, and Mark says fine linen. And it also says about Joseph that he was a good and just man, that he did not consent to the condemnation, and he waited for the kingdom. So that's the deal with Joseph. He was one of the two of the rich that stepped forward in regarding the burial, the grave. And of course, Nicodemus, who was a Pharisee and a ruler, he acknowledged Yeshua's authority. Okay, and it says that he provided 100 pounds of spices for the burial.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know exactly how much that cost, but that sure sounds like a lot of money. Okay. Now, one of the commentators, there is a Bible called the Net Bible, and I love their commentaries. So I want to read this regarding the 100 pounds of spices. I want to read what the Net Bible says. It says, the Roman pound, which is the litra, weighed 12 ounces. Thus, 100 Roman pounds would be about 75 pounds, or 75 pounds. But nonetheless, it's still a lot of spices, and pretty sure it's pretty expensive. And it's an obvious gesture that Nicodemus wanted to honor Yeshua.
Yeah. I mean, he was treated as great royalty. Remember the woman who had bought that expensive perfumed anointing oil, and some of the Talmudim were bent out of shape, saying, hey, we could have sold this for a lot of dough. Why the waste? And Messiah says, she's doing this for my burial. So the burial of a righteous man is honorable. It is not a waste of money. It is sending somebody off as somebody who is to be remembered, somebody who is to be honored, and that again, who will tell of his? Will speak of his generations? We will. Who will speak of him? We will. That's us, because we were the wicked ones that he died for, And the fact is, with rich men and the deaths of him, literally is what that says. So it's plural. So it's because he died many deaths, in essence, for people today. He died once for all, but all includes an individual death for each individual who accepts his atoning sacrifice. Just like the word Elohim does not necessarily mean gods. Depending on how it's used, it's speaking of the plurality of his influence. You know, he's Elohim. He is sovereign over many things, and not just talking about him being many sovereigns over things, but he is sovereign over many things. He's honored over many things, and the deaths of the rich, with the rich in his deaths, I see that in the plurality of the far-reaching effects of that death. And the fact is, he was assigned with the death of the wicked ones, because this Isaiah 53 is all it's talking about is he's suffering for this because we're wicked, we're perverted, you know, all these different things that we're responsible for. He's getting it, you know, in spades because of us. So we are the wicked ones. We are the ones who dug the grave for him. We are the ones who hit the spike through his hands, in essence. We're the ones who pierced his side.
Good observation. So just quickly regarding the tomb, as I said, it was common practice that a tomb was usually for family members. And by Joseph giving the tomb to Yeshua, which was new, which meant that it was not used, Joseph did not have family members there.
Right.
That meant that most likely Joseph was forfeiting his right and the right of his family to use that tomb, because now Yeshua would be in it. But the thing that I marvel the most is that I wonder, with the resurrection, I wonder if Joseph said, "Hey man, look, I got my tomb back."
I wonder if he left a deposit.
I got my tomb back. I can now be buried, and my family could be buried in there. So I wonder if he got, you know, if he thought along those lines.
How about this? Remember when the corpse fell on Elisha's bones? He came back to life. So maybe people, they went into the tomb of Messiah and they come out the next day or 3 days later.
Oh man! All right, so so getting back to the overall cost, because it says with the rich, indeed, it was the overall cost was, number one, in the fine linen, number two, in the new tomb. We'll say it takes money to carve it out, to prepare it, right? The 75 pounds or the 100 pounds, depending on how you view it, of spices, which is a lot of spices. And it's also, believe it or not, you know, remember that politicians are usually in for their own personal gain. And it wouldn't surprise me, and of course, this is conjecture. It wouldn't surprise me if Pilate said, well, if you want the body, you know, you got to cough up a few bucks, you know. So it wouldn't surprise me if Joseph had to do that as well. Of course, that's a conjecture on my part. And then, of course, as you mentioned, Bob, we have the alabaster flask of oil, which was very costly. So when you put that all together, indeed, it was a very, very expensive burial with the rich. So the prophecy indeed is fulfilled. Okay? The prophecy is indeed fulfilled. And there's one more cost. There's one more personal cost on the part of Joseph and Nicodemus. If they, and we all know this, if they came in contact with the corpse, then they would have forfeited their ability to celebrate the Passover. They would have to wait a month and celebrate it in the second month. So that was another personal cost on their part if they came in contact with the body. So there was a very expensive cost. It was indeed with the rich.
Unless he observed the Passover with Messiah the previous night, because don't forget there was different calendars and figurings back in the day. Also, the Passover of the Jews had come, so Messiah kept the Passover on Tuesday night, and then on Wednesday he was hung on the tree of sacrifice. And so if they were rabbinically minded, they would have been disqualified. But yeah, I see that they definitely put themselves in jeopardy.
Yeah, it's a cost. Everything has a price. It's a cost. So I calculate that in with the overall cost. And yes, of course, We don't know. The text does not say that they did come in contact with the body, but it's possible. We've run out of time, Bob. I don't want to go on. I mean, I wanted to share a little bit regarding this enigma, why deaths. You touched on one aspect. I think that there's another aspect why it's in the plural, but maybe we can touch on that next week instead of rushing it.
Okay. I just want to do a quick reading from Matthew 27. Just a few verses, just the narrative. 27:57 to 60. Now an evening had come. There came a rich man from Arimathea named Yosef, who himself had become a Talmid of Yeshua. This man went to Pilate and asked for the body of Yeshua. Then Pilate commanded the body to be given to him. When Yosef had taken the body, he wrapped it in clean linen cloth, fine linen, and laid it in his new tomb, which he had hewn out of the rock. And I think of Isaiah again, 51. And we were hewn out of the rock, who is Avraham. And he rolled a large stone against the door of the tomb and departed. The beauty of that is that Isaiah 51 says that we honor the rock from which we were hewn, who is Avraham and Sarah. And the commandment to honor our parents goes beyond our mommy and daddy, but actually honoring the faithfulness of Avraham and Sarah, our parents, the rock from which we were hewn, the matrix, or the what's another word for that? Anyway, the lathe, L-A-T-H-E, a lathe, that was Avraham and Sarah. So we honor our parents. We were hewn out of the rock, as this was this tomb of resurrection, and from Avraham and Sarah we have the womb of resurrection. We have, again, the word for mercy and the word for the womb are the same word in the consonants. So there's just a lot there, and we'll get into more of the meaning of the plurality of that next week. We'll continue on that, and we'll begin the last of the stanzas. Amen. Any final word before we move along?
This is some powerful stuff.
It is.
Some powerful stuff, and it's juicy. It's good that a person digs in and not just study academically, but sit still and think about the amazing prophecy and how it comes to pass. It's just amazing. It really, really is amazing.
It is. It's dangerous stuff we're talking about, because a lot of the stuff that we're talking about is not the stuff that you're being taught in the seminaries and in the cemeteries of higher learning. Because we believe in free thinking. We believe in doing research. We believe in proving all things, testing all things, not holding on to, well, we were never taught that, so let's just dismiss it. No, we're to prove all things. We're to test all things. And if that was not the case, that would not have been said. And the word that is given, that is inspired, is for correction. So sometimes we think we got it all figured out, and all of a sudden we'll have this verse, and we had this verse tonight where we're discussing, this is interesting. This could mean this, or it could possibly mean that. And we're in dangerous territory, because we're giving opportunity for people to figure this out themselves, do their own research, do their own study, come to the conclusion, bring it to the table, let's discuss. That's how the body of Messiah should be functioning. Working together, getting a deeper understanding, and not just burying the talent or burying the mina in the ground. No, we invest it so that we will grow. We will grow, and we will invest in higher learning. We need to know him better. We need to know him better. Okay, I'm going on, and I'm going to keep going. So I'm going to stop right here. So again, I thank you for watching. I thank you, William, and I pray for all those who would watch later on. I know that some people are involved in prayer meetings tonight and such, but I hope that you're watching us some other time. And please let us know what you think, and contact us, and throw in your couple shekels, whatever you think. But come to know him. Come to know him, because he's got a wealth of knowledge and information to enhance our lives and to help us to grow and to get a deeper understanding. So again, we thank you.
I just want to encourage everybody that's listening now, and as you said, those that will listen in the future, if you think this is good, wait until we get to verse 10 and we talk about the Asham.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, so it gets better and better. So come on back, folks.
And the being poured out, the drink sacrifices, and the wine, the hin of wine, and all that stuff. Yeah, it ends with a huge kabang. It doesn't end with a whimper. It ends with a huge, explosive, deep revelation. So let us continue our journey together. And next week we're gonna explore verse 10 and make comments on remaining points that we didn't get to tonight. But good stuff coming. Good stuff coming. So be with us. So we thank you for your patience in dealing with us. Yeah. And just be with us. And Patricia, are you there? Patricia? Okay.
Yes, I'm here. I had my phone on mute.
Oh,
See, you were such a faithful Talmud that you're here, and you did exactly what you needed to do. But I call on you, sister, if you would be so kind as to say our final prayer for the night.
Okay. Our Father, in the name of Yeshua, we thank you for this opportunity to come together this Wednesday night and open up your word, Isaiah 53. And we thank you for the great teachers that we have to break this down for us, and that we can go deeper into the scripture. And we thank you and praise you. In Yeshua's name, amen.
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 Amen. Amen. And thank you so much for tuning in and remembering that we are here every Wednesday evening at 7:30 or whenever you want to put us on. Put us on. You can go and do what do you call it when you do a whole bunch of binge? Do a binge. Do all of Psalm 119 in one setting. That's a challenge. do the servant song of Isaiah altogether, or do it in chunks, and it's going to be fun. It's going to be good. So I thank you again for joining us. And again, I invite you to join us on Shabbat morning at 11 a.m. But until then, and then we will be here again next Wednesday at 7:30. So again, I thank you for your patience and your willingness to be with us this evening. And William, I especially thank you. And we say to each one of you, Laila Tov, Ulehitraot, and everybody on the phone, just hang out for just a couple. And we say Shalom, Shalom. Lehitraot. See you later.
Shalom, shalom.
Amen. Ta-ta for now. TTFN. That's famous words.